Hey, welcome. Uh, Bit of a slow day today. Uh, Had a really weird dream. Really messed up dream. That woke me up a bit late. It's raining and overcast and So the start of the day has been very low energy. But yeah, welcome everyone to another session of uh game design, of tabletop design. And I have now realized or remembered that there is the tabletop RPG category on Twitch, which is probably a more fitting category than software and game development. Because people might expect something completely different when they check that category. I don't know. We'll see. Not that it probably matters too much, but it feels more correct. All right. Vessel, congrats on first. How are you doing? Okay, so we are back to our massive project here. That started all the way back here. Um, the OSR style. Whoa, what is this? Yes, the OSR style RPG that we were doing. So basic setup. This is talking about characters, basic character stats, adventuring systems, and then um, some resolution mechanics that I'm still not happy with. So I made an entire another stream just talking about resolution mechanics. Um yeah. And today though, to help with this, we are going to talk about they have many names: scenarios, structures, adventuring systems, game structures, mechanical sets, mini games, even. And what I'm talking about is basically this list all the way at the beginning here, right? Where you have specific rules and mechanical structures for different activities in the game, right? So, uh, yeah, let's call them game structures, more neutral name. Game structures. So what are they? Um, Mechanical, bit big, maybe. Also, I forgot to turn on some music. Let me do that right now. This is not my usual, like, usually on stream, I have game audio. I keep forgetting. I haven't done this one in a while as well, so. Huh? Oh? Uh, I should really download these and just have them in a playlist at some point and just play that. Working? Okay. I don't know how loud it is compared to my voice, but hopefully it's okay. All right. All right. So, game structures, mechanical subsystems. Used. Oh my goodness, my handwriting today. For specific um, situations or activities. Let's call it that for now. Right. So, for example, for example, the biggest one that many games have, including D&D. In fact, the only one that D&D has, combat. But also things like dungeon exploration, overland travel, downtime, and also one that basically no game gets right. I've never seen one that that actually sounds fun. Chases. Chase rules are like the unicorn of RPG game structures for some reason. Um, so there's a lot of possible ones, etc., etc. Right there, you can basically have loads of mechanical subsystems, and in fact, uh, in and these appear frequently in video games, right? So video games tend to have one main game system that they run in, and then everything in the game runs on that, whether you're just running around the wilderness, or whether you're fighting, or whether you're talking to people and such. That all runs on the same basic idea. And then they have a whole bunch of mini games, right? That very obviously are mini games separate from the main uh game gameplay flow, I guess. Right? Uh e.g. lockpicking is a huge one. Lockpicking. Um Sometimes also things like persuasion might be a mini game. For those who've played it, Oblivion had a very infamous persuasion minigame that no one basically understood until you either read up a guide or tried it a lot of times and went like, what is going on here? What's happening? Right. Um Sometimes they have mini games for things like crafting, sometimes it's just a menu. Um right. But fishing Fishing is also a mini game that appears in a lot of video games, right? Um, and these are very obviously outside of um okay, very obviously, oops, it's not how you write a Y. Outside the main gameplay structure and flow. Okay, right. So um so something like in Skyrim, right? You run around, you click to whack things, you press a button to interact with things, and so on. And that is all inside the same uh, gameplay, mechanical gameplay structure, right? Traveling, unless you use fast travel, right? But otherwise, walking around places, combat, um, going shopping in towns and such, all runs on the same gameplay structure. And then you hit a lock, you interact with the lock, and the entire screen changes to a separate minigame, right? A completely different thing. And that is effectively how these game structures work, right? Mechanical subsystems used for specific situations and activities. Now, in video games, these tend to be very jarring, right? Very obviously inserted mini games that are sometimes not connected at all to any of the other game systems, or very uh tentatively connected. Very, no, that's not the right word. Loosely. There's a better word for that, but very loosely connected to the main game. Even things like character stats or so in an RPG, right? So you have, once again, the persuasion minigame in Oblivion um is not really connected to your speechcraft skill. The only thing, I think, well, not the only thing, but like, it's so, for those who don't know, the Oblivion speechcraft system or persuasion system is essentially you get uh oh my god, that is a horrible circle. You get this circle, slightly better. It's divided into these four wedges, and then each wedge is a special action, something like admire, uh, joke, uh, boast, and threaten. Right? Not necessarily in this order or in this position, but doesn't matter. And then you get these wedges. You get a full wedge, right? You get a tiny wedge, and then you get a half wedge and a three-quarters wedge, right? Like this. And then the minigame works by, you have to click each of these actions once. And the wedge that is in that action while you click it determines how powerful that action is. And every NPC has one love action, one like action, one dislike action, and one hate action. And you kind of mouse over these four and look at the facial expression and be like, ah, that's a big smile, so this person loves to be admired. This is a big frown, so this person hates when I boast, right? And so on. And then you try to figure out which ones these are. and you try to get the a large wedge on the two positive actions and a small wedge on the two negative actions. And every time you click, the wedges turn clockwise. Right? So if I say, okay, this NPC loves being admired. Okay, then I click admire, and then the wedges move, and now the big wedge is here, the tiny wedge is here, the half wedge is here, and so on, right? And the whole thing rotates. And then I look, okay, what's the next one? Oh, there's a tiny wedge on boast, and this NPC hates boasting, so I click this one, right? Um, because then the effect of that is the smallest, and so on. And and you are under time pressure. And there's a very abstract puzzle game, really. Um, and the speechcraft skill doesn't really affect this. Sure, at a certain level, you get a free rotation, so you can rotate it once without any effect, and it kind of messes with the numbers, like negative ones don't hit as hard or so. But overall, it's a very abstract mini game that is completely divorced from the gameplay system the rest of the game runs on. It's divorced from the narrative. Like, what is this? If I'm trying to get on someone's good side, I admire them, I joke with them, I boast to them, and I threaten them all four at once. What? I have to do everything, and it's just very much completely separated from everything else in the game, right? The storytelling, the other game systems, the gameplay in general, right? So that's not all systems in video games are this isolated or this very obviously separated mini games, but that's usually how we know them, right? Whereas in role playing games, some systems are very much integrated, but also sometimes a game only has a single system, like D&D. D&D only has a single game structure, and that is combat. There's nothing else. Right? Sure, it has the core or basic conversation, roll die to check, but that is core to every role playing game. Right? That is essentially, if you don't have that, you don't have a role playing game effectively. And then um you take that very basic core conceit, and then you insert additional subsystems. And combat is one of the biggest ones in many games, and the only one in D&D, like I said. So there are three axes. We've already defined this. Three axes. Let me make sure that I get the same. Yeah. So we have uh, abstract on this side and physics engine on this side, right? So this is the mechanical subsystem. You can say, all right, how much does it try to depict, in quotes, reality, right? The not our reality. When I'm talking about reality here, I'm talking about the reality of the setting, the fictionist setting of the shared world, right? The reality of the game world, which for a lot of cases follows pretty closely to ours, right? Physics works how we expect it to most of the time. Lots of other things work as we expect to most of the time. And right, so do you have a physics engine, or do you go extremely abstract and don't try to depict the reality, or don't try to depict the um the rules and happenings of the reality? And this is a choice, right? You can choose one or the other, or not one or the. You can. This is a spectrum, right? So you can go anywhere on here. Then there's a second axis. Again, let me make sure. Right. Specific and unified. I'm still not quite happy with this. I'm still thinking it's possible to reduce this to 2, but I haven't found this yet. So what I mean by this is getting closer to the video game thing, right? Specific means every subsystem is highly individual to try and depict that particular thing. Or unified means they all run on some base systems and they all uh, have the same general structure that mirrors the structure of the core system. And then there's a third axis, which is, again, yeah, isolated versus integrated. So isolated means this subsystem runs on its own and is not affected by anything outside of it and doesn't affect anything outside of it. Some board games do this, right? Board games, you have several systems, and the only thing that that puts it into the game is the fact that it's on the board. And the only other thing it affects is things like victory points. It's like you do this action, you gain victory points. Okay, great. But it doesn't actually affect anything else in the game. And integrated means it hooks into other systems. At the very least, it hooks into the core system. And sometimes it hooks into other systems as well. Right? And video games tend to be the mini games tend to be more on the abstract side, right? Tend to be more on the isolated side and tend to be more on the specific side, right? So if I just pick a fourth color, very blasphemously, right? Video games are more on this end of the spectrum, typically. Um, Video games can do that, right? They can put in completely separated minigames, because A, that's kind of what we expect, and B, they can run all of the calculations in the background and have a nice graphical interface and so on, so to make the usage of this minigame more intuitive than in a tabletop role playing game where you're all sitting around the table and then the GM or someone who's read the rules has to explain, no, okay, you do this and then that, and but you don't have the graphical interface to play around with. You don't have it seeing what it does, what any choices do, what you're supposed to envision. Right? If you pick a lock in Skyrim and it shows you the inside of the lock with all the tumblers and the lockpick moving in and pushing the tumblers around, that is very, very intuitive at first glance. Whereas if you had to explain something like that at the table, and you can also do things like pushing the tumblers and then having all the calculations and randomness happen immediately instead of having to roll dice and check tables and blah. So video games can afford that. Tabletop games, not so much. Right. So tabletop games should be more on this end, right? Note that I'm leaving out the physics engine because physics engine is its own beast. But let me put an asterisk here. Right. That's don't feel like you have to emulate video games in this. In fact, you probably shouldn't. Video games are a different medium. In fact, instead, think about the entire spectrum that you have here. Okay. Ads are playing, so I will stop talking about this for a bit. Also, it feels like okay. So yeah, my ad manager was not fully displayed on my OBS. Oof. It's times like this, because my birthday is around this time, times like this I feel my age. Like, really feel my age. um, okay. Welcome back, everyone. So, now that we've talked about some of the more high-level theoretical things of game structures, let's just delve into one. Haha, delve into one. Because we're discussing dungeon delving. Haha, get it? Anyway. So, dungeon delving. As an example. Or, as it's sometimes called, the dungeon crawl. Now, the dungeon crawl is a very ubiquitous structure. Again, mainly because of the popularity of D&D. However, the dungeon crawl used to be a much more complete game structure, and the rules for that were phased out over the editions until in 3rd edition they completely disappeared. And ever since then, dungeon crawl, the main game structure of Dungeons and Dragons, it's in the name, has suffered, as is visible by so many videos and articles and discussions online about troubles with characters in dungeons and like resting too much and dungeons being not dangerous and blah, and pacing issues and all. There's a lot of extra stuff that comes up, a lot of problems, because all of the mechanical support structures were all eliminated, basically, or simplified away. So very basically, what components do you have to a dungeon crawl? Well, you have a dungeon, right? So PCs going through a dungeon. Now, this in itself, the way a lot of people run the dungeon crawl in modern times is quite abstracted already. Sometimes, not always, right? But you basically have um so when we look at dungeon, a dungeon is a series of rooms containing something of interest, right? And players have a choice of how to navigate in general. There might be some exceptions depending on the dungeon, right? So what that means is you have some room, right, that you enter, and then you have something inside, some encounter, be it a monster, a treasure, a prisoner, a lab, a puzzle, a trap, whatever, something. And then you get a choice of exits sometimes. And then you pick one of them and you enter a different room, right, with another encounter, something happening in there, and then you pick another exit. So there is a very clear, right, uh, clear gameplay loop. Right, and the gameplay loop is one, PCs enter a room and encounter something. Now, encounter doesn't necessarily mean combat encounter, right? Encounter just means something is there that catches their interest, right? So, like I said, it could be monsters, treasure, traps, NPCs, etc. Right? Two, PCs deal with encounter. However, that thing can be dealt with, however they want to deal with it. PCs choose an exit from the room. And that leads them to another room, right? And that leads back to one. That leads them to another room, and so on. Uh, they can choose where to go. They can backtrack and choose another path. If they think, oh, there's an ogre in there, we don't want to fight that. Let's backtrack and choose another path somewhere. Or they can just exit the dungeon if they want, right? Come back another day, and so on and so forth. So there's just by this geographical schematic setup, a dungeon, at least on the high level structural level, almost runs itself. And that's one thing. That's one of the things you want, right? So a dungeon almost runs itself, and that's uh, it's also extremely easy to prep, right? You just get a bunch of rooms, connect them somehow, or you get a map off the internet, and then you fill that dungeon with things. You fill the rooms with things. Either you have a list, or you have tables to roll on, or guides on how to best stock a dungeon, or whatever, and then done. Right? So a structure gives you, as a GM, immediately uh, easy to prep, easy to run, right? So this is why, as a GM, you want these structures, because these mechanical structures are scaffolding, are frameworks that help you with the prep, because they clearly show what needs to be prepped, right? And if the structure is well designed, also limits prep by uh, eliminating extraneous prep. So if you are running something specific, a certain structure like a dungeon, you only need to prep the inside of the dungeon, and how you prep the inside and what you prep for it is pretty clear, right? And you can just stick to the minimum and have a good time. Right? And so it tells you what to prep: a map, a dungeon map, and then a bunch of rooms. Fill these rooms with various encounters. And you're basically done, right? And you don't need to prep anything else outside of that. So um, so it tells you what to prep and it tells you what not to prep, right? And that makes it easy for you and easy to run. This is getting horrible. This is like, oh my goodness, should have planned this out. um, Easy to run. The the mechanics uh help uh help with, right, generating how do I form this? Player choice, or not generating, providing is a better word. Providing player choice and assist with generating content, right? So it gives players a choice. Like if you have a room and there's two exits or three exits, or it's like, oh, I can go out this exit, or I can go back and take another path earlier, right? So there's always some form of two paths you can take, maybe three paths you can take in a dungeon, and so on. That gives player choice. And the whole, oh, there are encounters in here, either preceded or you roll for random encounters. That is also a thing to occur to players. That assists with generating the content and running the content, depending on the exact system that you use, right? Um, and that's why a uh, a mechanical structure actually helps you as a GM. And as a player, this this is huge. getting choice is the whole point where we're playing games, right? Because a game, right? Why play a game instead of watching a movie or reading a book? Because a game gives you choice, something that a static or linear medium doesn't give you. That's the whole point, right? That's the biggest differentiator. A game gives you choice. And if you have a mechanical structure, and that mechanical structure intrinsically guarantees that if you use me, I will help provide player choice, then that is a huge boon, right? It makes sure that the player actually gets to play a game, basically. Um, okay, let me see. You know what? Let me get rid of all of this and write it down in a better way. Uh, yeah. Let me get rid of all of this. Oh my goodness. This is too messy. Okay, so you have on the one side. Okay, let's first see if this is done. And then can be expanded as it was in older editions, right? Let's leave it at that for now and look at the system in more detail. Because now that we have an example, we can look at this and say, okay, so as a GM, systems, so why would you want to use these game structures? Why would you want extra mechanics in the game? Because uh, easy to prep, right? By showing you what to prep and what not to prep. That's probably a bit easier, a simpler way to phrase this. And then easy to run, right? Uh, provide player choice. Uh, actually, no. I want to put this somewhere else. I want to put this on the player side. Um, but instead, what I have here is give clear gameplay loops, right? And help deliver. Okay, yet another word, deliver content. Right? It's like, okay, how do I make sure I've prepped all of these awesome encounters and awesome things and story and blah and whatever? How do I make sure the players experience it? Well, by using a mechanical structure that guarantees that the players will experience it, more or less. That's the basic idea. Okay, then as players, um, player choice, right? So, the system, um, intrinsically is horrible. What is wrong with my tablet? Oh my goodness. Intrinsically guarantees uh, choice just by following the structure. The structure makes sure that you include player choice, right? And another very important thing is, and that is tied to the first one, is prevents getting lost. And that is tied to the gameplay loop, right? Um, so, and this is an idea I got from, again, Justin Alexander, wrote an entire series of articles on this. If you really are interested in this topic, check that out. It's an amazing resource. Um, provides a default action, as in what do we do next, right? There's always a default action that the players can fall back on if they are out of ideas. In combat, that default action is something like I attack the enemy. In a dungeon, the default action is we go into the next room, right? Um, so if you're ever lost on what to do, there's always a minimum choice. That's a horrible phrasing, but like there's always that default choice at the bottom that says, okay, if you run out of things to do, fall back onto the mechanic. It's a safety net, right? And if you then look at that and say, all right, here's an action you can do. If you cannot think of anything else to do, there's always something given. So you will not get lost. Um, so, and you don't have to. Now, very, very important, these structures, these game structures are not straitjackets, they are safety nets. Very important. And that's the beautiful thing about a tabletop game as opposed to a video game. In a video game, those mini games and other structures are straitjackets because the computer can only do what it's programmed, and you can only input things into the game it's programmed to accept as input. Right? So if a lockpicking mini game works like this and it doesn't have an option to say bash the lock, that's it. You cannot do that. You literally cannot do that because the computer does not accept bashing the lock as an acceptable action. Right? You have to play the minigame. Um, and if you can't, you're stuck. Uh, whereas in a tabletop, you can try anything you want, basically, right? That's kind of one of the ways people explain, oh, what is a role playing game? What is a tabletop role playing game? It's like, oh, it's a game where you can do everything you want. Yeah, that idea is still in there, right? If you're in a dungeon, no one is saying you can't suddenly bring in a company of miners and start strip mining the dungeon, whatever, right? of all of the hewn stone in there, and just take that and build something. In fact, there's an article about that. It's like, what's the best way to get materials to build a castle? Well, you just go into the nearest dungeon because a lot of dungeons are actually shaped and hewn stone in all the walls and floors and such, and that's amazing. You just take all of that and you save yourself the work of getting so many stonemasons and quarries and blah. Right? No one is stopping you from doing that if you really want to. Strip mine the dungeon off of its building materials. Um, you can, but if you are out of ideas, if you don't know what to do, then the mechanic, the game structure jumps in and says, "Yo, here's the default action you can fall back on," and that is also a power. So this is connected, of course. right? With the gameplay loop, because there is a gameplay loop, it provides the default action, right? Because there's always some sort of action that leads to the next step in the loop. But there's more. But wait, there's more. So for the narrative, so far we've only been talking about mechanics because yeah, game structures are mechanical. Um, that's kind of their whole deal. But for the narrative, a game structure reinforces uh, themes or moods, right? That you want to to emphasize or to explore in the game. So if wilderness survival is really really important, right? And the whole fighting hunger and thirst and getting lost and facing wild animals or whatever and orienteering yourself based on landmarks like mountains and such, if that is a huge deal and you really want to play that and have that in your game, then you can use a mechanical structure that emphasizes these things, right? If you want combat to be cinematic and heroic and full of wonderful stunts and the players always coming out ahead, use a combat system that reinforces that kind of mood. If you want combat to be very gritty and deadly and a single stab wound can kill someone, use a combat system that reinforces those moods, right? So the type of mechanical structure you pick is going to bring out certain themes and moods in the narrative. And that is extremely powerful. That is much more powerful than uh, just telling people, oh, please role play this. Oh, please keep in mind that the theme is actually this, right? And then when you play our game, please keep that in mind and try to bring that in yourselves. That can work, but that relies on the group wanting to do that, being able to do that, right? Sometimes not being able to explore a theme is just because of lack of skill in a way. Well, skill might be the wrong word, but not knowing exactly what this theme feels like, not knowing the tropes of this theme, not knowing how to evoke it while playing. And then you can use these mechanical systems to prompt the players, to guide the players, right? Um, so you can prompt or uh, guide um, or remind players and so on, right? This is especially visible in things like horror games, um, where like horror is really really difficult to pull off because in horror games you're scaring the players, not the characters. And if you have a good mechanical structure for a horror game, that really can bring out the horror flavor without the GM needing to be an excellent storyteller, uh, without the players needing to be excellent actors, right? It makes the game and the theme more accessible. And and the game is here to help you experience this. And instead of you already doing it on your own, you play the game to to do this. Right? It's like watching a horror movie. You're hoping the movie will scare you instead of you scaring yourself. Right? Same thing with the game. You're hoping the systems will prompt and guide you instead of you doing it yourself. Actually, I will write this down while the ads are playing. Um, right. You want the film to scare you. Oh my goodness. Not you scaring yourself,
Endure.
right?
In enduring, grow strong.
Doesn't being oh my goodness, I cannot spell excellent. Nor players being actors. Okay, so this is just what I had, what I already said, just written it down. Oy. All right, welcome back, everyone. I just wrote down what I just said, right? For example, in a horror movie, you want the film to scare you, not you scaring yourself. Right? That's the whole point. That's why we watch horror movies. Um, right. So it doesn't rely on the GM being an excellent storyteller or director, nor the players being excellent actors. So it essentially lowers the skill floor. Sorry, it lowers the skill floor. It doesn't lower the skill ceiling. Very important. Skill ceiling is still high. So it allows more people to experience certain themes and moods and types of stories. Um, it's probably also a good word here, right? Without needing a lot of theatrical training or storytelling training or all of that. Like if we watch Critical Role, right? Um, those people are all trained and experienced voice actors, right? They know how to get into a character. They know how to get into a story. They know how to tell stories together with other people. Um, so when they play D&D, they can use their skills in narrative, in crafting and uh, portraying a narrative to push the ceiling way up high, right? That's what makes it so entertaining to watch, right? Because they are in their element. Um, but not everyone is a trained actor. Right? Not everyone is a trained writer. It's the same if you watch um, Will Wheaton's Tabletop. Some of the he mainly plays board games and card games, but sometimes he plays role playing games. And then the people he invites to play again are typically other actors or writers for things like TV series and such, right? So people who are amazing at creating stories and just getting many story ideas and such on the fly, and who have told so many stories that they already know what they're doing. This is second nature to them, right? So if you watch them, same thing. The amount of acting, ideas and story ideas and such that come out of these people is crazy. But that's because they are very skilled and experienced at their craft. Not all of us are this. I'm not, right? Um, so you shouldn't have to rely on people being actors or writers or directors or some sort of similar profession for 5 to 10 years before you can have fun and fully experience what a role playing game can give you. That's asinine, right? That's like jobs asking for a 10-year job for 10-year job experience for an entry position. Right? You don't want that. You want the game to help complete noobs, just average people to experience certain themes and moods and stories, and you want the game to kind of lift them up and reach under their arms and help lift them up and be like, yo, you too can experience this kind of story um, just by playing the game, right? And that is what a game structure can give. And even if you don't care too much about mechanics, right? Even if you think, oh yeah, no, I'm a great GM, I can prep things, I can run things, and as a player, it's like, yeah, no, I always see, I always know what to do, I always have ideas on what to do. That's like the narrative power of game structures is still there. This is why, very interestingly, this is why a lot of very narrative heavy games, right? Story games and such have extremely um I don't want to say rigid. Rigid kind of gives the wrong image, the wrong idea, but have very strong, extensive game structures because of this point, right? Because of them being able to create narrative, using mechanics to guide and reinforce the narrative. And that is something a lot of games fail to do, especially the big ones, right? Who are stuck in tradition. And I have to say, this is something that is relatively new. I say relatively new. This came about in the mid 2000s and was refined over the next half decade or so, um, where people really looked at role playing games and said, yo, we can use mechanics to aid the narrative, which was a completely crazy idea back then. And the big games, things like D&D, things like Call of Cthulhu, things like World of Darkness, and so on, Shadowrun, etc. They were all made before then, and now they're stuck, right? They're stuck with all the baggage of the past and can't really do all of this narrative game structures, right? So that's why you have to look to smaller, good indie games. Powered by the Apocalypse is a big one that really, really does this well. Plenty of others. Don't Rest Your Head, my absolute favorite example for that. Where Don't Rest Your Head is a horror game, and the mechanics, the core mechanics of the game, will make the players feel the tension, right? The rising tension and the huge moments of, oh, how much am I willing to risk? Am I willing? How far am I willing to risk losing my sanity and my character to get out of the situation right now? Right, and these are choices the players make. Um, so as an example, Uh, right. We have cinematic combat versus gritty combat, right? And depending on which combat system you choose, the game is going to feel extremely different. Okay, there's one last thing though. Very, very, very important that also gets overlooked quite often, and that is the connection between players and the GM. Essentially, trust. So it helps build trust between players and GM, right? It helps that players, it helps players trust that the GM is being neutral and fair, and it helps the GM trust the players to play to the game and not be intentionally disruptive, right? By having this shared framework of the game structure. Example in Monopoly, for instance, right? The playing to the game means you buy up the lots and you build houses and hotels on them, and then you give and take money. So if you land on someone else's lot with a hotel, and you pay that person a huge chunk of money, you know you can trust that this other player didn't do it to specifically be cruel to you personally, right? It was the game that did that, the mechanical structure that did that, not the other player. So if you're in a combat and the GM rolls some dice, maybe even out in the open, and then tells a player, yeah, you get hit for 35 damage, which is pretty high in D&D. The player can see, okay, this is not the GM targeting me and having a personal vendetta against me personally. This is the game. All right, so you remove the whole personal animosity part and look at it and say, okay, no, this is the game happening right now. Right? It helps build and maintain that kind of trust. And as a GM, you can also say, yo, you guys agreed to play this. We're dungeon crawling, right? Or we're doing this right now. Can you guys please, stick to the mechanical structure and not do weird things? Like if you plan to play a game about a group of people crawling dungeons and then the players never enter a dungeon, never engage with the structure, the GM just goes, well, what am I doing here? Right? That's the kind of idea. Also because players naturally tend to gravitate toward things that have mechanics because mechanics provide meaningful choices with that's also something with clear results. That's something I forgot to write. Right? Clear results. And players like having that kind of control. When you're just out there in a conversation, you might have choice, but the where one choice starts and another choice ends, or if something is actually a choice or not, is not always clear. And you're not so much in control because you have to kind of convince the game master to let you do something and see things from your side. And then when you roll, it's like, and are the results actually clear cut, or is this just the GM very loosely interpreting the results? And sure, that kind of play can be fun and happens a lot. But at the same time, if you have a clear mechanical structure, right, the players are giving very clear choices. They can evaluate between them, and they can clearly see when something happens. That was the result of the choice that I just made. And that is a safety net. That is something that players can gravitate to and say, all right, I'm now playing this game. I feel in control. It gives player agency, right? And as I said way before in a different stream, limiting choices actually enhances player agency. Right, so sometimes you don't have that many choices, mechanically speaking, but that makes each choice more impactful, more meaningful, right? So this building upon the mechanical structure helps maintain trust between players and GM, right? Because both sides can defer to, well, this is the game. And if the game turns out not fun, right? Even if you defer to it and then you say, well, okay, but that's not actually fun. Okay, you're playing a tabletop game. Change it, ignore it, whatever. That's the rule zero, right? That's the if something is not fun, don't use it, change it, or use something else, right? Sure, you have the freedom to do that. But the first step can be to defer to the system, and then you say, yeah, okay, fine, we're playing this game, right? This is what we're doing. Um, so yeah, so it's good for players, it's good for GMs, and it's good for everyone at the table to experience the narrative, right? Now, uh, so let's actually get into designing now. Let's continue with the dungeon crawl. And now I am actually going to look at the game I'm designing and look at what I want with this. So, in this dungeon crawl, so what do I want? Things that I want this structure to emphasize. I want this structure to emphasize, right? Right. Let me write it. Whoops. Where can I? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's put it down here. So I want this to emphasize dungeons are dangerous. If you're in a dungeon, right? A dungeon, you must never feel like you are out of danger, right? Even if you have cleared 2 or 3 rooms, even if you have plenty of resources with you, right? You must always feel like you are willingly entering into something that could seriously harm you or even kill you. Right? If you are in a dungeon, you must never feel like you're out of danger. You must always feel like there is something here that could harm you. Right? So things like, which path do I take? Well, every path is dangerous. Where do I rest? Well, resting in a dungeon is inherently dangerous. Do I have enough resources? Probably not, because the dungeon is dangerous, right? So speaking of resources, exploration is costly, right? Uh, Resources like food, torches, gear, health. Health I cannot spell anymore. Health, etc. are the costs you pay to delve, right? To delve in the dungeon. Okay. And then um uh treasure. There's a point about it. So dungeons are bountiful. That is also something. They are dangerous. Exploration is costly, but also dungeons are bountiful. So treasure, artifacts, magic, and knowledge will not will are all waiting to be found. Right. So that's a big reason why people go in. And that also means that these things are the main motivator. You don't go into a dungeon to um, kill monsters, gain XP, and gain levels. That's not the point. That's not why you go into a dungeon, because there's a high concentration of XP waiting in there, right? Um, you go in to find treasure, right? Money. Find powerful artifacts to use, find magic to use, find knowledge either to become more powerful or to advance the story or where to go next, etc. Right? Knowledge can also be very, very valuable if you frame it correctly in the story. Uh, and all of these can be found in the dungeon. Are to be found, not can be found. They will be there. They are in there, guaranteed. That's the whole point, right? Um, what else do I want? I want um uh choosing I don't know if I can phrase it like that actually. Choosing the lesser of two evils. Choosing the least bad option. What do I mean with that? So things like keep gear or pick up treasure. Cut losses and run or push onward. Risk uh danger and darkness, or play safe. Right. So like because you only have a limited number of item slots, it's like, do I keep my gear that I have with me? Like if I have a grappling hook or a rope, do I keep that? Or do I pick up this gold statuette? Right? I only have the item slots for one, not the other, not both. Right? Um, do I cut my losses and say, "Oof, I already have 2 injuries from this dungeon"? Do I leave now, or do I try to find even more treasure because I don't feel like I found quite enough yet? Right? Do I risk danger and darkness? Right, running out of resources. Um, in the future, I never know. Like I'm down to 2 torches, man. I could be in complete darkness and not have enough light to get back out. Do I push one more room? Right. Uh, or do I play it safe and say, you know what? I'm gonna leave now. Go out now. Um, and this also one last point, and then ideas. So dungeons are right. This dungeons are dark. In a lot of modern games, dungeons are no longer dark. So there. So um so this this already suggests some things to the core system, right? So this suggests, or not suggests, but this reinforces limited item slots, right? This is um importance of treasure, right? And very important, treasure must be worked for. Eh. So it's not you get into a dungeon room, oh, you find 100 gold pieces. Get into a second dungeon room, oh, another 100 gold pieces. That's not how it works, right? Sometimes you have to go through a series of rooms and then you find a big treasure room. And this one is leaving a dungeon soft resets it. Soft, I write soft reset because if it were a hard reset and you go in, then you could just use your knowledge of how the dungeon was previously to help you. But if you know that if you leave a dungeon, right, to go back to town to rest and cure and clear your inventory and all of that stuff, repair your gear, etc., the dungeon is going to soft reset. Right? If you come back, rooms will be repopulated, things will have moved, traps will be rearmed, etc., and so on. And so you have to work through it again, but in a different configuration. Right? So that is a choice, right? I have cleared 5 rooms, right? It is relatively safe for me to walk out through those 5 rooms. And if I go through the 6th room, that might be the treasure room. Do I risk that? Or do I go out, but then I have to fight through those 5 rooms again when I come back? Right. Um, so that's what these are mechanics that are immediately suggested and implied by the points that the system should emphasize. Um, all right, I will use this ad break real quick to go to the bathroom, and then I will see you in a bit.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
I am back. Oof. Okay. So yeah, let's go through the other points and see what these mean, what these do. So, dungeons are bountiful means uh guaranteed treasure somewhere in the dungeon. Right. So it's not like for every room you clear you get 100 gold pieces. That would be boring and predictable and not in line with risk reward. Right? But it's more like, oh, every couple of rooms you might stumble into a treasure room, or you might find a powerful monster that is using a powerful artifact or something like that. Right? Um, it cannot be predictable and like regular. So it's not like, oh, every 3 rooms, the 4th room is a treasure room. That's just the same problem, just modified a little. No, it has to be maybe the left corridor leads to a treasure room and the right corridor doesn't. Right? And then if you pick the right one, well, sucks to be you. If you pick the left one, well, you know, that's just very lucky in a sense. Well, not lucky because you should explore smartly. So encourages smart exploration, right? So you don't just trudge from room to room and be like, oh yeah, I'll find the treasure at some point. You want to minimize the amount of dangerous rooms you find and maximize the amount of rewarding rooms that you find. Right, so encourages smart exploration. Um, Systems to leech resources. Right? Some sort of system or systems to leech resources. The most obvious one, and one that's very often used in OSR, is torches burned down over time. The general idea is a torch lasts 1 hour, and you track time using various systems. Once the hour is up, that's it, the torch is gone. And however many torches you have with you is how many hours you can spend exploring the dungeon. Generally speaking, there are also some systems that um, that reduce the usage of certain items even more. Like you might roll a die, and then if the die shows a certain value, oh well, your torch doesn't have 1 hour; it only has 50 minutes now. Or there might be things happening in the dungeon that snuff out your torch. Maybe you fall into a lake, an underground lake, or something, and then that's it. Your torch is now ruined. Um, so you can never be 100% sure, right? Um, so that's this thing. Unforeseen events, such as falling into a lake and suddenly having the torch go out. Or the biggest one that is often used, random encounters, right? Unforeseen events. What was the one I was going to write here? Does not, or randomness prevents 100% planning, right? Like the die that just reduces the amount of torch flame you can have. And I'm not sure I like. There's something older editions did. Original Dungeons and Dragons did this. I'm not too big of a fan of it, but it really, really shows how the dungeon itself is almost like a hostile entity, an organism working against you. So things like dungeons are always dark, and back then, no one had dark vision. Players didn't have dark vision, so you had to have some sort of light, or you couldn't see. Right? But in a dark dungeon, A, light makes you really, really visible. So you cannot sneak around. And B, dungeon denizens all have dark vision. It's the reason why orcs and goblins in D&D to this day have dark vision. Because those were dungeon monsters, and if they are monsters in a dungeon, they have dark vision. That means even in darkness, they can see you and you cannot see them. Right? Things like that. Or doors. Doors have a chance. Whenever you encounter a door, you roll a die, and then on a certain value, the door is stuck. On a certain other value, the door is locked, or the door can be okay. And then if the door is stuck or locked, you must find a way through it. You must pick the lock, or you must force it open, or whatever. And doors, once you're through a door, the door closes behind you unless you take steps to keep it open. That is explicitly written in the rules. If you go through a door, if the party has gone through a door, entered the room, the door closes. Or maybe if they leave the room, through another door or another corridor, all doors in the room they just left close. And if it's a stuck door, well, guess what? It's stuck again, right? Unless they use pythons or spikes or whatever else, or completely destroy the door, right, to help keep it open. Dungeon monsters do not face this obstacle. All dungeon doors will always open for a dungeon monster without any problems. If you're a dungeon monster, there's no such thing as a stuck or locked door. For the players, there are. For the monsters, no. Right. So that whole thing makes it feel like the dungeon itself, and there are other things as well, but it makes like the dungeon itself is an organism that is there to make your life difficult. Right. I don't need that, but um I do want some other systems to make the dungeon dangerous and oppressive. So systems to leech resources, and one of the best ones is time pressure and time keeping. Right? Okay, so now we know what we want the dungeon to do, what we want dungeon crawling to do. Um, and now we know how we can things that we can implement into the system, right? Um, so yeah, players require torches. So PCs without light can't see. This is not so much a dungeon crawl system as it is a core system. Do not give players or do not give player characters dark vision. I just no, don't do that. Dungeons need to be scary. Otherwise everyone would go in them, right? Um Farmer having a bad crop this year, well, there's a dungeon nearby. Let's just go in and grab some gold pieces. Done. You know, if the dungeon isn't scary, why not go in there? Um, and yeah, so the system that many use is a turn-based system. Now, why is a turn-based system useful? Because it does things like turn-based. Why? Timer for random events, right? And also timer for resource or condition depletion. Some games, like Torchbearer, for instance, depletion, go so far as to have the dungeon turns, and then the more you go into the dungeon turns, you start getting hungry and thirsty and tired and frustrated, right? And those place more and more penalties on your checks and your actions. And if you don't eat after this and that many turns, your character becomes hungry. And when they're hungry, then they take a penalty of some sort, right? And then if your character doesn't rest after this and that many turns, they become tired and then exhausted and so on and so forth. So you can track a lot of things with these timers. Um, and so and because this exists, uh Let's see. This creates a time limit. That encourages uh what's the term I'm looking for? Opportunity costs. If you know you only have this and that many torches and food and gear and such. Oh my goodness.
Party! You must gather your party before venturing forth.
Ayo. Eclipse, hi. And Yuri, hello. How are you doing? Uh you were just chatting. What were you chatting about? How's it going? Tarboy raid. Hello, hello. It's nice to have you all here. Welcome, welcome. My name is Chichen. I'm a Bard VTuber, and I play old games and or role-playing games, except today I'm designing a role-playing game. So, hooray. Be lurking, but I keep stream up. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the lurk, Yuri. Um, and yeah, Eclipse, how did it go? What were you chatting about? And did you have a lot of fun? Most important, did you have fun? I was playing with Aiden some Unreal, then Terraria. Ah, that scuff problems got the cult. Oh no, so decided to end chat at the end about next few days. Ah, okay, okay, nice, nice. So, plans coming up. Do you have any New Year plans? I don't actually know. I don't know if I asked. Um, but yeah, it's nice to have everyone here. We are currently in the middle of designing New Year's Eve? Yeah. You need people for that? Or are you doing something online? If you need people for it? Like a New Year's Eve celebration online? That sounds very interesting. Okay. Okay, understood. Yes. I mean, I don't have big plans for New Year's Eve. Plan was to stay home because outside is too many people. So yeah, it depends. I might be able to hop on, maybe. My mom might fall asleep early. Um, so yeah, stream. Okay, so a New Year's stream. Sure. I'm interested. I will have to know if I have the time, but I'm definitely interested. Um, but yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm currently in the middle of designing stuff for an RPG. I have. Oops, that's not what I wanted to click. Here, I have a lot of pages of notes, as you can see. Um, but yeah, I mean it's my regular stream time, so I'll try to be live till New Year. But because of my location, I have to end when the New Year hits in Germany because of the noise and calming the bunnos. Ah, bring the bunnies on stream. But yeah, New Year's fireworks. I know that in Germany, like everyone fires New Year's fireworks on their own. It's like oof, and you get it everywhere. Yeah, only a few. Yeah, only a few. This is like the third stream I think of designing this. Um, but yeah, if anyone is interested in tabletop role playing games, I have been playing and designing them for about a quarter century. So, any questions you have, feel free to ask them. I have a cam, but I'm not willing to show myself, and the cable is not so long. Very understandable. Very, very understandable. A picture or two show them a stream button on live stream. Yeah, very understandable. Just they are so cute. They really are. Uh, but yeah, and lately they're pretty chill with me. That's good. That is always good to hear. Yeah, give them. I don't know. Do bunnies like hugs? It's always like a meme or like this internet thing. Bunnies want hugs. Maybe. Laying down, not caring if I approach them and stay flat. But no. That is adorable. Those in general like attention, but they hate being picked up. Ah, okay. Okay. So yeah, just let them be then, I guess, and just pat them. I guess is what you do. Um, but yeah, where were we? In the middle of designing a system for dungeon crawls. Yeah, very classic RPG stuff. Especially because pets and stuff seem for them like grooming. Ah, they actually take the pets and stuff like attention and affection. That's amazing. That's like the perfect pet. Like they're cute, so you want to pet them, and they want to be pet. Just the casual things you do on stream. Exactly. But yeah, this stream in particular is talking about how to use mechanical structures to bring to use marketing terms to bring your role-playing game to the next level. Ooh, get it? Next level because you level up in RPGs. Yay. Um, but yeah, designing something for dungeon crawls right now. So there's a couple of things that I wanted this system to emphasize. What exactly that means, what this means mechanically, and then developing the system itself. Only thing they're very quiet, so if they're unhappy with something, they either hide or stomp or both. Okay, but I guess if you know how to read them, that can help. Um, okay, I'm trying to think back into need to be able to read the room and their body language. Yeah, makes sense. Like when is a bunny relaxed? When is it tense? When is it trying to run away? And so yeah, makes sense. Um, okay, trying to look through what I wrote here. So yeah, you don't see this kind of system in many games nowadays, or not in D&D. D&D used to have a system like this, and now it's gone. So it used to have a turn-based system for dungeon exploration. Right, so one turn equals 10 minutes. And if you look at older Dungeons and Dragons texts, right, they still use turn versus round. Turn is the 10-minute turn, and round is a combat round of, I think back then it was 10 seconds. I mean, cats and stuff, they meow at you for something they want to show you or stuff. Funnels may try to approach you and boop for attention, but they get scared easily if you actually react to it, so they mostly not show you why they booped you. Oh no! Ah, that is so relatable. Oh no. That that is both adorable and very tragic. Also need hay and other greens like always. Yeah, true. Um, okay. So sometimes surprised how much they drink. Ooh, okay. I guess maybe they just go through a lot of water because high energy all the time. Maybe. But true, that is another factor. Uh, what was I writing? Um, the bowl I have was enough for both cats that my ex-girlfriend had from the size, but the bono seemed to drink more. Oof. And a new bowl. Dang. Okay, so they drink more than two cats. That's a lot. Or maybe they just play in it when you're not looking, and then they get water everywhere. Who knows? Dwarf rabbit. Oh, so smaller ones even. Dang. Yeah, that is surprising then. Hmm. Ooh, sorry, I just yawned. That was apparently didn't sleep quite enough. Both together earning the size of one of the cats. Huh. I don't know, is that a trend? Do smaller animals drink more relative to their size? So maybe that's a thing. I don't know. Shouldn't talk about the sleeping part. Nah, it's okay. Like 4 hours. Oh no. Yeah, then go rest. Seriously, yeah, go rest. And if anyone else also needs to go rest, please do so. I'm just here designing RPGs. Um, but chatting is fun. Yeah, but resting is more important. Seriously. Don't just live on 4 hours of sleep. That's not healthy. That's You will get old very quickly, and I know I am already old. What if I rest and chat? If you can multitask like that, then sure. Oh no, no, don't. You will become older than me, and I'm already old. Um, so please don't. Too additional. Yeah, I mean 6 hours is not great, but it's better than four. Deplete. Uh, I'm not talking about taking the next night only 2 hours sleep. Wait, are you planning on sleeping only 2 hours? Is that what you're saying? That's not that's not good. Please don't. Um, But yeah, in any case, ads are going to start soon. And I will use this moment again to hydrate and to get up and stretch a bit. Because that is also very important. Yeah, okay, yes, thank you for that. And thanks for the head pats.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Yeah, ads. Yeah. Ugh. But yeah, I have ads set on a schedule. Oh my goodness, it's Peebs. Hello, Peebs. You've been lurking. Well, hello. Thank you for lurking. Wait, hold on. Okay, let me stretch a little bit more. I'm really feeling it in my my back. We'll be heading out then for rest. Don't know how long it will last. The timer seems to be broken. Oh no, should be soon. But yeah, okay. Eclipse probably can't hear me right now. All right. Yeah, ads should be over now. But yes, please go rest, Eclipse. Thank you for the raid. I almost said thank you for the stream. Oh my god. Thank you for the raid. And yes, please do get some rest. And I'll see if I can join you maybe on New Year's Eve, maybe sometime before or after. Wonderful stream, beautiful day. Yeah, thank you. Same to you. Get rest, please. Yeah, let me shout out Peebs, who is an awesome streamer, very, very comfy. Definitely check that stream out. Yes, of course. And also someone who popped in earlier with the raid. Did I get the name right? Yes, Yuri, who made not most, but a lot of my emotes. So yeah. Also, very, very comfy stream. Does a lot of art. Yeah. Check that one out as well. Okay. Seems like I have 30 seconds left with out of 30 seconds. Feels like I've already 3 plus 1. Oh no, then something's wrong. Okay, yeah, no, that's... Yeah, Twitch is broken. It's supposed to be 90 seconds. 90 seconds every half hour. So that we get no pre-rolls, because pre-rolls suck. This way I can at least pause what I'm doing. Okay. Mental reset. Okay. From bunnies to dungeon crawls. What a jump. So yeah, turn-based. I have a turn-based system. Why? Because that's a fixed timer for random events, a fixed timer for resource and condition depletion, and because of this, it provides a time limit that forces opportunity costs, meaning players have to make a choice. Do I search this wall for a secret door? But that will cost me a turn. Or do I move on to the next room? Right? Do I go left or right corridor? I only have enough resources for one path, not both, possibly. For those with ads, Chijin is expressing a gratitude to his nice choral music playing in the background. Oh no! swooning and falling from the clouds and going thud on all the streets below. We're having angel pancake today. Oh my goodness. That should have been over like 3 minutes ago or something. That's Thank you. Right, so that's the meaningful choice opportunity costs, right? The players are very clearly shown or provided with a choice, and one of the consequences of picking one choice is not being able to pick the other one because of the time limit, or increasing the risk that much more if they pick both, which is also a choice with a clear consequence. And I want this. If you've watched some other of my game design streams, I love meaningful choice with clear consequences. So anything that provides that is good. It really stings how much ads on YouTube and Twitch seem to be designed to ruin the experience and break. Also might be worth checking in on adding subtitles, even just for part of hearing. I do have captions on. I do have captions integrated here. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, there should be. I mean, they are live captions done by a computer, so they are not 100% accurate all of the time. But, you know, other than hiring a full-time captioner who just sits there and types up everything I say, that's the best we have right now. Give us decisions that make us think. Yes, exactly. So this is another example of how limiting player choice increases player agency. Right? It's a delicate balance. If you give players no choices, they don't have any agency, i.e., that's the railroad. If you give players all choice, then they don't have any agency because then they're just flipping a coin or rolling a die and going, oh, let's just do this. Right? That's the wide open, nothing matters kind of gameplay. I don't think anyone plays like that. Maybe people who don't understand how sandboxes work and try to do that. That's the other end of the extreme. That also removes player agency. So you want to give players enough choices that they can wrap their head around them and see how each choice will impact the game, either their characters, or the environment, or the narrative, or any future choices, etc., etc. That you want players to see the choices they have with the presumed consequences those choices will bring, and then they can make a meaningful decision on that. Right? It's like if you go to a supermarket and it's like, oh yeah, I just want to buy some ketchup, and then you go into the ketchup aisle and you see 50 companies offering 300 brands of ketchup, and then you go, whatever, I'll just randomly pick one. Right? Sure, you have a huge amount of choice, but you don't have any agency in that regard. Right? That's what I mean with too many choices. Because capitalism breeds innovation, yay. So we have this turn-based system, right? And this opportunity cost, this time limit that creates opportunity costs, is a way to drive player agency. So one turn is 10 minutes, which is a good segment of time to count. An hour is too long, right? But anything shorter than 10 minutes seems too fiddly. Right? If you have something like 1 minute, you can't really accomplish anything meaningful in a dungeon exploration that takes only 1 minute. Searching a room, you can say, all right, that takes maybe 10 minutes or maybe multiples of 10 minutes, right? Depending on the size and complexity of the room. You could say, yeah, sure. If you have a sparse room and you're searching it, right? It's kind of like, oh yeah, I know I have this one book somewhere, or I know I left my phone somewhere in this room. And then you search the room, you search your bedroom or something. You can imagine, yeah, okay, that probably takes around about 10 minutes. Or if you are searching for something that's packed away in some closet and you're really determined to find it, you might spend 20 or 30 minutes searching for it. But again, multiples of 10 minutes, right? So you can say, all right, searching for this one specific thing in this complex room with a lot of containers takes you 3 turns. So those are discrete numbers that you can work with that kind of align with our experience of reality. And that's very, very important. We're not designing a physics engine, but we're still designing things that we as human beings can relate to. Right? So 10 minutes to search a room, 10 minutes to check a chest for traps, 10 minutes to fight a combat. Right? We don't have experience fighting combats, but given like if we watch movies and watch the cinematic combats in there and such, yeah, 10 minutes seems like a good time for that, right? Etc. Etc. 10 minutes to translate a mural, like a title on a mural or something, or 10 minutes to flip through a book you just found to see what it's about and if there's anything important, that kind of idea. So, one dungeoneering action, right? So for every turn, you check for events. The event might be a random encounter. It might be something like resource depletion. It might be something like a clue, right? Depending on the system you use. The most common system is you check for random encounters once every turn. You deplete resources by 1 step. So your torch lasts an hour, 6 turns. Okay, after 1 turn, you tick off one of these turns that your torch lasts. Right? If you're using hunger systems or so, and you say, okay, exploring a dungeon is tough work because it's high pressure, you're always very tense, and you're doing physical activity, you can go, I don't know, 3 hours before you go hungry. You start feeling actual hunger, right? 3 hours is something you can track in turns. That's 18 turns. It sounds like quite a bit, but once you start factoring in like travel to the dungeon, travel from the dungeon, and things like that, that is definitely something you can track. Right? And 18 turns is not that unwieldy a number. Right? And then you get your 3 hours, and then once that is over, you say, okay, time for food. And if you don't eat, spend a turn eating, you go hungry. Then you take a -2 on all checks or whatever, right? You can totally do that. And then one dungeoneering action, that's what I said, right? Search a room, check a chest for traps, whatever, talk to someone, right? Could be about 10 minutes, and so on and so forth. And you can layer other things into here as they come up, as they make sense. So, and also traveling is also a dungeoneering action. So you can limit how far can you travel in 1 turn. And that kind of shows how deep into the dungeon can you go to see how long it then takes for you to exit the dungeon if you were just walking through, right? And not dealing with all the rooms and such. that is also something you can use as a guideline. And just having this turn-based system provides a lot of these things, right? It provides the unpredictable, unforeseen events. It leeches resources. This is more the dungeon build-up, dungeon design, but encourages smart exploration, again, because of the opportunity costs. Treasure must be worked for, right? Because you have to spend time, limited time, and limited resources to go to the treasure. This is also the dungeon setup. And then, yeah, light, very important. If you don't bring enough torches or don't bring enough lanterns and oil, at some point, it's all going to deplete, and then you're going to be in darkness, and then you're going to have a bad time. Right? So, all of this can be solved with the turn-based system. And it also solves the biggest complaint or biggest frustration that I see a lot of GMs having with Dungeons and Dragons. Players resting after every encounter in a dungeon. Right? I've talked about this before, but essentially a lot of advice videos or talk videos and such on how to run Dungeons and Dragons is all about how do I stop players from resting all the time? Right? So players go into a room in a dungeon, encounter some monsters, blow all of their abilities, all of their spells on this one fight. The fight becomes way too easy, right? Becomes non-challenging, and then afterwards the players say, "Oh, I lost 3 hit points. Let's take a long rest." Right? And then they take a long rest because there's nothing in the mechanical system of Dungeons and Dragons that prevents that. Nothing. Zero. No rules. Nada. Right? So it's and then so players, the GM would have to use game master authority and a ruling to say no, you cannot rest right now, which feels bad when the rest of the game is so structured and when it deals with something this mechanical. Right? If the GM rules something that is less mechanical, right? Like, no, this door is 50 tons. It's a huge stone door that is, I don't know, 6 meters tall and 4 meters wide, and who knows how thick. It weighs 50 tons. You cannot push it open. Okay, that's less of a mechanical thing, more of a narrative thing. Having a ruling over there is more acceptable. And in fact, that's how the game works, right? But the GM outright forbidding a mechanical choice out of GM fiat is a very feels Batman moment, right? Both for the players and for the GM. And that's because there are no mechanical systems. That's because these systems are divorced from each other, right? Resource depletion on the one hand, and resting on the other hand, or not resource depletion through dungeon delving. Very important, dungeon delving. And then recovering resources through resting. These systems are divorced from each other. And that creates this this dichotomy, right? Where players come to an encounter that is balanced, quote unquote, balanced for a party that maybe already went through 3 encounters and was weakened proportionally and appropriately. But they're not. They're fresh, full hit points, full spells, blow everything on it. The encounter becomes trivial. The game becomes less fun, and then the party rests again. Right? I've seen a lot of videos trying to force arbitrary systems on, yeah, no, you don't allow the party to rest until their 3 encounters in, or you, I don't know, you just don't allow resting in a dungeon, or you try to beg and negotiate with the party or whatever, right? Just do this. do this. Just have a mechanical system, right? Just have a mechanical system that says, yeah, okay, sure, you can rest in the dungeon, okay. But if you rest for 8 hours, every single turn, I am going to check for random encounters. Right? And 8 hours is 48 checks. So I could roll a d6 48 times, and whenever it comes up a 1, you get a random encounter. Do you want to risk that? Right? That's a very heavy-handed way of dealing this. There are actually systems for resting in a dungeon built into mechanical dungeon crawling systems because they foresaw something like this, right? So resting in the dungeon, right? Because you have the consideration, you've already considered time limits, resource depletion, all of these. The dungeon is dangerous, etc., and all of this. You've already considered all of these things mechanically. It's not a very big leap to then go, okay, if it depletes resources and the players want to recover resources through resting, how do I integrate that into the system? And many, many dungeon crawl systems that have this kind of deal, turn-based tracking and such, also have some sort of system to allow for a very risky resting in the dungeon. Right? Maybe, again, the game master then rolls for random encounters. Maybe not 48 times over the course of 8 hours, that's stupid, but with an increased chance or so. Right? Or the party can then actively take steps to secure a room, like they find a dead-end room and then bolt the door shut and put spikes into it to make sure that no one can get in, and then they put up a guard, a rotating guard, and so on. And then the game says if they take these steps, lower the chance of a random encounter by this and that much, etc. This is built in. And when you present the system to the players like that, then the players again have the meaningful choice of, do we rest in the dungeon, knowing exactly what will happen mechanically, instead of the GM just going, no, you can't rest because I said so. That is, and again, the point I raised earlier, trust. If both the players and the GM can refer to the system and say, sure, you can rest in the dungeon, but then I get to roll the shiny die here, and on a 3, 4, 5, and 6, some monster finds you sleeping here. And the players can say, right, that is a thing. That is something we have to factor into our choice. Right? If the players instead don't play to the system and just blow all of their spells and abilities on a single encounter and then say, I want to rest, and then the GM doesn't have a system to fall back on and says, no, you can't, that deteriorates trust. And that is not something you want. So again, right, the point I made earlier, having this neutral arbiter of a system negotiating and mediating between players and GM helps build and maintain trust. Right? So yeah, I wasn't just throwing terms around. I've actually thought about this stuff. This is an actual thing, right? So resting in the dungeon. And what is this song? Never mind the song. And in fact, the system I do want to use here is that resting in a dungeon, of course, has chance of event. This chance can be manipulated by the players finding relative safety in the dungeon, right? a dead end room with only one entrance that they can secure, bolt shut, lock, put heavy bags in front of the door, whatever, right? Any sort of that. And also types of rest. What I mean by that is some games also do this, some OSR games and such, is when you rest, it's not just resting. It's not like the D&D short rest, long rest kind of deal. It's all long rest. But depending on where you are, you recover different amounts. So if you're resting in a dungeon, which is a high danger, high pressure environment, you recover not as much as if you were, say, camping in the wilderness, which is still dangerous, but not as dangerous, acutely dangerous as in a dungeon. And if you rest in town in a safe haven, that is again a different amount and type of recovery than resting in the wilderness or in the dungeon. Right? So maybe if you have an injury, resting in a dungeon is not going to help you with injuries. Sure, you can recover some, I don't know, stamina or endurance or whatever it is, right? The immediate resource that you lose. But if you have any injuries, well, you have to go back to town for that. If you want to recover your injuries, you need to go back to town if you're not using powerful magic, right? So that is, yes, you can rest, but you're not getting as good a rest as if you were resting in a safe location in town, right? So that is also something that these games do. And then you can say, right, that the players can go, okay, we don't have any injuries yet. We've only lost a bunch of endurance or stamina or whatever. Let's rest in the dungeon because that will help us. But if the players then go, oof, our characters have a whole bunch of injuries, resting in the dungeon looks a lot less appealing all of a sudden, right? Um, let's just go back to town because we can't effectively continue adventuring in the state, right? And of course, because you are tracking time, you can also do things like fatigue, right? Tracking fatigue is a possibility, but you're tracking fatigue on a much larger scale. Like fatigue doesn't typically set in until you've done things for many, many hours, 6, 7 hours or so. That is a long time to track in 10-minute turns. Right? So that might not be feasible. That might not be uh that might be too fiddly, too big for this system, but it is something you can include if you want, right? Um, if it's important to you, or if the situation arises. Right? Maybe overland travel, and you traveled half a day to the dungeon, and then you enter the dungeon, and you go, yeah, but you've been traveling through the wilderness for half a day, right? You guys are pretty tired. Um, that is something you can include, right? So again, not a straitjacket. Let me just reiterate this. Game structure. Did I call them game structures? I called them game structures. Game structures are not a straitjacket, but a safety net. Right? They can be ignored. Ignored is a bad word. They can be expanded and played around. Right? So maybe the system says, okay, one dungeoneering action, searching a room, checking for traps, talking to people, one combat. But then if more situations arise, then you can use the structure to say, okay, this kind of action is also one turn of dungeoneering, even though it's not listed in there. Right? You can do whatever you want. More or less. Right? And it's a guide for the GM to help them run the game.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Okay. Um thinking about if I want to attempt a second structure after the ad. Let me just. Okay, I just added this bit. Welcome back. So it can be expanded and played around, and they help guide, not control or restrict the play. Right? As I was saying with it, they can help you make rulings. Right? A lot of and that's a big irony I see, or not irony, but like a big yeah, it's kind of an irony. It's like a lot of people, when they play games or design games, they say, yeah, my game is rulings, not rules. Right? The GM makes rulings based on the situation because I cannot make rules that cover every single possible situation that can come up in a game. That is true. You cannot make rules that could cover every possible situation that might appear in a game. And you shouldn't try to. Even physics engine games don't do that. Some might aspire to it, but it's impossible. So then a lot of people designing games or playing games jump to the opposite extreme and say, well, in that case, I only have a single rule, which is you roll a die against a number and check if it makes it or not, if it succeeds or fails, and everything else is left up to the group. And yes, technically, that is then a rulings, not rules game where the GM makes rulings depending on the specific situation. Thanks for the hydrate. Depending on the specific situation that arises in the game. However, you still have to keep in mind the scope and the scale of your game. In a very simple and more comedic game like Lasers and Feelings, that works. So Lasers and Feelings, very quickly, is a game where the characters are a crew on a spaceship called the Raptor, right? And the captain has been injured or fallen ill and is occupying the medical pod, right? The captain is out of commission. Captain is out of commission right now.
So the rest of the crew has to kind of work together without leadership, and everyone is a very chaotic, less than not less than competent, but like very, what's the word? Not flawed, but kind of larger than life personality, and that is going to lead to clashes. And you have a very, very basic system where you have two stats: lasers for anything logical and precise and mechanical, and feelings for anything emotional and interpersonal and more in the moment, right? So thinking versus feeling, basically. And if you're better at lasers, you're worse at feelings. If you're better at feelings, you're worse at lasers. And then you just roll a single die or so and check if you make it or not. And that's the only rule, right? You check, do I roll for lasers or do I roll for feelings? Roll a die, see if you beat your stat or not, and that's success or failure. But the game is meant to be a one-shot game. You're meant to, like, if you don't have anything else to do in an afternoon or so, get together. The rules fit on one page. You roll a bunch of dice to create a comedic situation. Players have these larger-than-life characters that come together, and then you just have a bit of chaotic fun, right, for one afternoon, and that's it. The game doesn't overstay in that sense, and in that sense, sure, yeah, a game with a single rule like that works, and you can have rulings based on that because it's not too serious. But if you're trying to have a more serious game in the vein of, say, Dungeons and Dragons, and then you say, yeah, but the only rule I have is you roll a d20 against a number and check if you succeed or not, you are basically telling the GM to design the game for you. And if you don't give the GM some sort of guide as to, okay, but how do I make these rulings? Right? What do the numbers actually mean? How should I err? Should I err more in this direction or that direction? You are effectively telling the GM to design your game in real time at the play table in the situation while they're also trying to run the game. That is what you're doing. And it is also a fallacy to think that to have a rulings not rules game, your game must have close to zero rules. Right? Having systems like this, as we've just seen, having a system like this still allows for rulings. If you say, okay, things, if you have a turn-based system for dungeon crawling, and then you say, all right, in one turn you can create, you can perform one dungeoneering action, and then you give a couple of examples: checking a chest for traps, searching a room, talking to someone, fighting one combat, right? Eating food, right? Eating food, drinking water, tending to wounds, and so on and so forth, takes one dungeoneering action. Then that is a very good guideline for the GM to then adjudicate other things that might appear. Right? Oh, the party wants to fortify the room. They want to like build a barricade, set a trap, and lure monsters in. Okay. If the whole party works on this together, I would say that takes one dungeon turn. And that is not covered in the rules. But because there are these rules, it helps the dungeon master or the game master then come up with a ruling that fits into the rest of the game, mechanically and thematically and narratively. Right. And then instead of just kind of going, okay, I guess, roll a bunch of dice. Two of you failed, so the barricade is only half built, and then you start luring monsters. What is happening here? Right? No, you can very clearly adjudicate. All right, depending on how many turns you spend, you can make your defenses slightly stronger up to a certain point, right? But then I'm still gonna check for random encounters, and that again gives more choice to the players. It gives a guide to the GM to adjudicate situations and so on. So this still allows for rulings. It's just that if the players don't know what else to do, they have a default action. If the dungeon master doesn't know how else to run, they have a mechanical guide to help them. And that is the power of such systems. Right. And that's another reason why to use them. I feel like I'm spending a lot of time advocating for these systems because I don't see them very often in games. I don't see them, even though they are so very powerful. Or rather, I don't see them in tabletop games. I see them all the time in video games, as I was saying early in the stream. But for some reason, when it comes to tabletop games, suddenly people are very allergic to them. For some reason. Right? There's a lot of talk about what kind of games you like. Oh, I like rules light games that get out of the way and don't come in between me and the play, blah, blah, blah. All of this. And it's like, no. No, actually, if you actually analyze how people play, right? When combat comes up in D&D, holy heck, everyone pulls out their dice. Everyone is suddenly paying attention because you are running a game system, a game structure, right? So, and it's kind of like, so it creates this idea that rules are bad somehow. Rules prevent play, which is so paradoxical to me because rules are what you are doing when you are playing. That's literally the thing you do. So I don't know. So I feel like I have to justify and defend these a lot. So do excuse any rants in that direction. Um, a lot of games have cut out a lot of these systems. Many people don't learn them because the big games don't have these systems, so they don't know they exist. And when they do find them, some of these, it also doesn't help that a lot of these systems are not well designed. Chases, for example, chase systems. I have yet to find a good chase system in any game. And I've read a lot because I've been intentionally looking for it. So when you get badly designed mechanical systems, of course, yeah, then they don't provide all of the things I just said they should provide. And that leads to a lack of fun. So yeah. It feels like these things need more love and need more appreciation, which they are not given. And on the opposite, they tend to be given a lot of hostility or animosity, at least. It feels like. In any case, right? Combat. So let's look at what we can check with our combat system that we want. So what does it emphasize? So combat is lethal. Right? What does that mean? So what I want for this is, did I format this? Yeah. So a single good hit can lead to serious injury or death. Maybe. I'll have to look at that. Right. So that also means it's combat is lethal. A single good hit can lead to injury or death. Combat is. I don't think I have to write combat is all the time. It's chaotic. Right? So no neat turn taking. Anyone could get hurt at any time. And also no and that also ties into the first point. No what conflict of attrition, i.e. Rolling opponent's HP to 0, right? Because in a lot of games, that's what combat devolves into, especially video games, for example, that think that higher difficulty equals more HP. All you're doing is just sitting there and rolling dice or making attacks and slowly grinding your opponent's HP down to 0. Including in D&D, right? And that is, in my view, relatively boring, right? It makes combat relatively predictable. It makes it much more controlled than it should be. It's like if you kind of know, all right, these monsters, the highest damage they can do is 30, and I have 150 hit points, I can take 4, 5, 6, 7 attacks before I need to watch out, before I need to start being careful. So the first 10 rounds of combat are trivial, are boring, are inconsequential in a way. And that sucks. That's not something you want. Combat is quick, right? So combatants go down quickly, right? Both monsters or enemies and the PCs can go down very quickly. So the whole thing here is the whole idea for combat in the beginning was to discourage players from engaging in combat. Negative design space, right? You make combat rules that are very dangerous and deadly and have heavy hitting consequences so that players choose not to engage in combat. Unless there's no other choice. Unless they have kind of gotten themselves into such a bad situation that combat is the best choice, in which case, good luck. Right? And even if combat isn't lethal, combat needs to be costly, right? So things like oh my god, I can't type or write anymore. Injuries to be um, not frequent, but likely and lasting. Right. So no, take a full rest, heal up to full HP again, and then the combat is like doesn't matter anymore. Um. And will require use of other resources. Um. Where do I put this point? There's another point I want to make. So, things like throwing a flask of oil into the room and setting that on fire. Right? Okay, awesome. That really helps you in combat, but now you no longer have your flask of oil. Right? Encourages players to plan ahead and prepare to stack odds in their favor. This is part of the first point as well, right? Like the whole, oh, the players will fortify a room, lay a trap, and then lure monsters in. Um, is much more preferable than just running into a room blindly and then suddenly encountering monsters and then having an open fight, an even fight, right? The players don't want that. Um, uh, okay. So this just means no hit points. I've kind of already written that all the way in the beginning, but no hit points. That's because hit points are too safe and predictable a buffer. Volatile damage system, where any hit could cause an injury, right? Where a good hit, either rolling a high attack or high damage or however it works, leads to injury, right? It bypasses things like, I don't know, a stamina system or stress system, and then just straight up, nope, you're injured now. Um, and okay, I don't want this. I want death to be that players can see death coming, right? So if you have too many injuries, the next injury, the more injuries you have, the more likely the next injury is going to kill you, kind of a system. Right? That can work, but it's not the first injury immediately kills you. That feels very out of the blue, nowhere, and is no fun for anyone, right? Instead, the players can take calculated risks and saying, I have no injuries, right? So I will approach the decision of entering combat differently than if I have 3 injuries and say, oof, okay, I will now weigh my options completely differently of combat or no combat. It's still not predictable, but it gives the players some control. And if they do choose to enter combat with 3 injuries and they get killed, they shouldn't be surprised, right? It's like, yeah, okay, I could have seen that one coming, that kind of deal. This one, no neat turn taking. So there are 2 things. Well, no, 3 things I don't like about the neat initiative turn taking thing. The first one is it's a lot of bookkeeping. Rolling initiative at the beginning of combat, it's like, okay, and you see this group of monsters and they draw their swords. Tension rises, and then roll initiative. Okay, now we're doing 5 minutes of checking dice and calculating and getting everyone sorted. All the tension, poof, gone. Right? And then you enter combat, it's like, oh right, we were fighting people. Right, that's happening. So first off, it's bookkeeping and kills tension. The second thing is it makes combat extremely orderly. Right? You know, okay, it's my turn, and then it's my buddy's turn, and then it's the monster's turn. We can set things up in a way, right? It's like, oh no, that monster's almost dead. I'm almost dead, but I go first, so I can risk another attack, or things like that, right? It makes combat more predictable. And it means that you can you can calculate things essentially. That's how do I phrase this? Like you know for a fact that if it's your turn, or not calculate things, but like it's very much the spotlight just, oh no, that's all. Yeah, no, that's, so the spotlight moves from one person to the next and the other people are just kind of sitting there. But worse than that, because the spotlight moves from one person to the next, everyone is forced to participate in the combat. Now I say forced because of what that does to the game design. Essentially what that means is every person, every character that could be created needs to be competent in combat. Right? So there is no such thing as, oh yeah, we have this one person who's here for combat, this one person who's here for traps, and this one person who's here for anything magical and lore. No. Everyone needs to be competent in combat, maybe even in different ways. And that leads to some very strange game design limitations and game design choices, and it leads to a very strange table balance, both mechanically, narratively, and such. And it's like, okay, I'm the fighter, I'm the combat dude. But hold on, everyone is the combat dude because everyone participates in combat. So what is actually going on? So by having initiative forcing everyone to participate in combat, everyone needs to be competent at combat. I don't want that. I don't want that in this game. I want combat to be something a player opts into by the choices they make for their character. And if someone says, no, my character is no good at combat, then you can, the mechanics should provide something else for you, maybe to contribute, but not the whole, oh, I roll to hit, I roll to hit, I roll to hit. That's extremely limiting, I feel like. Um. Okay, there's more ads incoming. So I will get up and stretch once again. Oy. And there are combat systems that function differently, that aren't actually full combat systems. So, for example, Blades in the Dark. But I will talk about that after the ad.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Oy. Okay, my mic, I think, actually picked up all the cracks. Dang. Yeah, my spine is way older than I am. It's not good. It's very not good. Eesh. I can feel age 40 creeping closer with every day. And it's scary. I. But yeah. I am getting a punching bag as a Christmas present. Um, so that should help with keeping me active, hopefully. Okay, ads should be over. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so no neat turn taking. Anyone could hurt at any time. So there is a system in Blades in the Dark where a combat check is just a normal check. There is no such thing as initiative. There's no such thing as turn order, right? You let the narrative decide who goes at what point. And very, very importantly, and this is something I want to implement in my game as well, the GM does not roll. Players roll all the rolls. So it's not player rolls to attack an enemy rolls to attack the player rolls to attack their. No, that's not what happens. Instead, the player does all the rolls. So if the player says, I wish to attack this dude, the player rolls, and then depending on the result, it could be they hit the enemy hits them, or they both hit each other. Right? And it's not one attack, one roll. It's like one move, one roll, right? So it's not one roll is is a swing of the sword. It's one roll is a piece of the struggle, maybe like a minute or so, depends, right? So there's a lot going on here. Only player roles. And this is starting to the reason I wanted to do these systems first, these game structures first, is because this informs a lot about the core system that I want to do, right? Only player roles. So player or not player. PC can get hurt on their own move. Um right. No combat turns Let narration decide. This is something that would need to be tested if this works. But also, not all PCs need to be competent fighters. They can contribute in other ways. And that is something I'm still thinking about how that will work. Combatants go down quickly. No conflict of attrition. Very important point here. Morale system. That was also in D&D until they removed it for some reason. So enemies have a morale system, right? Depending on how brave or fanatic or desperate or whatever they are. And when certain events happen, like if they lose half their HP or half of their number get killed or a leader gets killed or whatever, the GM would roll for morale, and if they failed, then the monster or enemy would try to surrender or run away or do something instead of keep fighting to the death and such, right? So morale system, very important. Combatants go down quickly. This one is just having low numbers, basically. Right? So not fighters walking around with 200 HP, and then taking 8 damage per hit. It's like, yeah, great, that's awesome. So volatile damage system is already here. Injuries need to be likely and lasting. It will require use of other resources. Encourages players to plan and prepare stack odds in their favor. So now this is where I'm thinking about using aspects and conditions. From Fate. So how this works is in Fate, you have a type of action which is called create an advantage. And what that does is you try to manipulate the environment or manipulate other people, NPCs and such, in a certain way. And then you roll to see if that succeeds and how well that succeeds. So you could try, if you're in a fight scene in a library or something, you could try to topple over the bookcases, right, to create an obstruction or to pin someone behind a bookcase or to create a big distraction or whatever, right? Or you can try and setting things on fire, right? Or fill a room with smoke, and so on and so forth. And these are aspects that you place on the scene. And you roll for it, and depending on how well you roll, you can create that aspect and then use it later on in the scene. So if you topple the bookcases, you're trying to create an aspect toppled bookcases, for example, on the scene, and then you roll, and if you manage it, it means, okay, you push over the bookcase, they fall domino style and such, and then from then on, that aspect toppled bookcases is real in the scene, and anyone can try and use it, right? So maybe if someone is then running away, you can say, "Aha, but wait, all the bookcases toppled, the floor is littered with books. Running away is difficult. They could stumble," right? It's like, oh yeah, right, okay, so let's check. You can now use this to your advantage. Or other more personal things like taking aim, right? Sitting there and taking aim means you're placing a taking aim aspect on yourself and then you try to use that later on, or you can try to attack people and put aspects on them, usually in the form of injuries, right? Like a broken leg. Right? If you attack someone hard enough and they take a condition, like a broken leg, and then they try to run away, and then you say, but hold on, they have a broken leg. That aspect is now hindering them. And these are a very elegant way of handling all the various situations that can come up of players and the GM manipulating the scene and changing details, changing aspects. That's why they're called that, about a scene or about a character. And they are a very, very narrative device. But I want to see if I can make them work in a game like this, in a more OSR game. Right? And this would do things, this would also help with mechanizing a lot of the different situations that can come up. Things like, okay, sure, while our fighter is up front holding all the monsters at bay, right, the thief is in the back lighting an oil flask on fire and throwing that into the room, trying to create the aspect on fire. Right? So instead of having this very loose GM fiat thing of, okay, let's roll if you can get the flask where you want to, and then it hits. Let's see, I'll just, maybe you hit, I don't know, 2 goblins with it or something, and this part of the room is now on fire, and then you come back, it's like, oh, which part of the room is on fire? That corner, not this corner. It can devolve into a lot of wishy-washy, unclear, very nebulous kind of fake, trying to be exact without having that exactness established in the beginning, and so on. A lot of things can happen, and then you don't really know how to use it. Like, okay, if someone walks through it, how much damage do they take? Then I have to check environmental damages, fire damage, and that's why those tables exist in D&D, right? Because you used to set rooms on fire, and then people will have to stand in there or walk through it. That's why you have environmental damage tables filled with fire damage types. Still in D&D. But if we replace all of that, abstract it a little bit, and make it into aspects, that can speed things up. And I mean, I'm already not doing the whole classic, everyone gets a turn, everyone gets an action in a turn, and then we go around the table and everyone just rolls their dice. No, I'm already not doing that, right? So why not try and make this fit in there as well? And this gives other players a lot of options and very viscerally reminds them of, hold on, you don't just have to roll to attack enemy, roll to attack enemy, roll to attack enemy. You can create aspects. Bonus. Magic. Magic in the game can be handled with aspects. Right, so a darkness spell could place the aspect darkness on a room. Or a binding spell could place the aspect bound on a creature. And this makes magic extremely flexible, but still clear enough, with clear enough uses that players can work with it. So that's definitely something I want to try and put in there, right? Aspects and conditions from Fate. It'll take some finagling. This is something I want to try and go for. And the whole encourages players to plan ahead and prepare, stack odds in their favor. Same thing. They just spend a while creating a bunch of aspects, right? In the room, for instance. It's like, oh yeah, I'm creating the aspect barricade, or I'm creating the aspect caltrops, or whatever. Right? And then once combat breaks out, they can then use these aspects to to make the fight easier for them. Right? So that is definitely something I want to see if I can put that in there. Mm. So I gotta think how I can, if there are any ideas that come to mind right now for the system. Um, Now this is a whole bunch of things together. So like I need to have, so what the system needs to have is a endurance plus injury plus death, some way to do this that ties in together with attacks or damage. The system also needs a success with cost, which is the both combatants injure each other or hurt each other kind of deal. And it needs the morale system, and it needs aspects. Right, so this is all the immediate mechanical things that this system needs to have in there. Right? Mm. And this is the biggest one, the endurance, injury, death system is the biggest one. I don't have any clear ideas for that one yet. I would like to find something that meshes everything well without it feeling like a bunch of independent pieces just tacked together. Mm. Yeah, so no clear ideas for the system itself yet. See, how long have I been going? 3.5 hours. Mm. Yeah, I do feel how I'm running out of steam a little bit. I think I've said a lot of what I wanted to say, and yeah, gone through what are game structures, why use them, and then how to use them, how they are made up, right? And if you want to make your own, it doesn't have to be that complex. If you want to make your own, there are other games where you can usually rip game structures out of. There are some some resources out there that have system agnostic, system neutral game structures that you can just plop in. You can also just start by doing like adding one tiny thing to a game structure, right? Like if you're dungeon crawling and you're worried about the dungeon feeling too safe, add some sort of timer and then just roll for random encounters. That's it. You know, you don't need resource depletion. You don't need the whole time limit thing. Just be like, okay, let's just kind of track time roughly, and then after every turn, every segment of this time, I check for random encounters. Done. And just add one piece, right? See how that goes, and it's likely going to change the experience quite a bit, and then you can go from there. Add more things if the direction seems like something fun, or throw it away and try something new if it doesn't seem fun. Okay. But yeah, I think I am going to call it here. It's been quite a bit. So let me come to this screen. Okay. Yeah, this was. Thanks for the stream. Yeah, thanks for being here. Actually got a lot done. Even though, again, it was filled with a lot of ranting, a lot of please don't dismiss game structures. You know, they are actually good. I think a lot of people also dismiss game structures without having actually tried them. They only see other people dismissing them. And I don't understand the animosity when most people play those game structures. Right, let's see who's on to raid. Yeah, let's go raid. Let's go raid Seahorse. Seahorse, who does a lot of awesome music sets, who's a DJ, musician, but also plays a lot of retro games. And is currently playing retro. Is it Chrono Trigger? I think it's Chrono Trigger. So yeah. Looks like it. Okay. So yeah, let's raid into there. Say hi to Seahorse for me. I'll probably also say hi. But yeah. And I might. When is New Year? I have to see. Sunday is New Year's Eve. Okay, I will have to see how my streams will work over the weekend and such, and over the New Year if I have any special plans, etc. happening. Yeah, that's why I didn't post a schedule this week, because of all of the stuff happening. Yeah. But yeah, I hope to see you all soon. Thank you all for being here. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Take care, and bye-bye.